morning, and thank you for joining this month's Worksoft webinar, which will explore how you can leverage automation to elevate process optimization and drive process improvements. I'm Alicia Bell, Senior Digital Marketing Manager for Worksoft, and your host for today's webinar. Today's presentation will be recorded, and a link to the on-demand session will be available for those who are unable to attend or who wish to share or review the information. Let me introduce today's speakers. Shobh Javed, Chief Strategy and Product Officer for Worksoft, where he is responsible for business strategy, product management, product marketing, and technology alliances. With Shobh's help, the world's global 5,000 companies are adopting process lifecycle automation as the new industry standard, and in doing so, achieve accelerated project timelines, reduced costs, and improved operational efficiencies. Our guest today is Rob Koplowitz, Vice President and Principal Analyst for Forrester. Rob's research focuses on digital process automation, as well as artificial intelligence and cognitive computing. Rob recently returned to Forrester after leading IBM's strategy for integrating Watson into the company's collaboration services. Rob has many years of expertise in enterprise software consulting, product marketing, product management, and strategy. He has served as a leader in Forrester's collaboration and enterprise social research. His career also includes leadership roles with Microsoft, Oracle, and a partnership initiative with SAP. Without further ado, let me turn it over to Rob.
Thank you, Alicia, and thanks to everybody for joining today. As Alicia mentioned, as a result, around the poll results, changes in the air, and we see it certainly coming out of those poll results. A lot of folks at a lot of different points in the process, but I think one thing that we can really focus on here is that process automation and this transformation. This is a huge opportunity, and I think for many it's a huge challenge. And why is this long tail of automation such a challenge? Well, we have to think about it differently. It has to be fast, it has to be effective, and it has to be adaptable, and it has to be close to the business. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I mean by close to the business, but increasingly your business stakeholders need to be driving your software strategy. It is a true expression of your business, and now I think we really have come to the point where it has to be very, very highly scalable. This isn't something that has to be done in pockets. It's something to be done in a standardized way across your organization. So let's start with this concept of digital and this idea that software is an expression of the business. What that means is that everybody in your organization is truly invested in using software as a differentiator and truly invested in showing how that works in driving your company's strategy forward. Not just IT. The days of IT driving the strategy is over. They simply can't scale to the level that we're going to need to get to true digital transformation. So let's take a few moments and just think about what's really going on here. What have we learned? And I'm going to kind of calibrate this around a couple of different concepts here. And one is digital transformation. These initiatives have struggled. In many instances, they have failed. And then what happened and how did we respond in the face of the challenges that were presented by COVID, a forcing function that really changed the way we work? And what do we have to do now in order to be more effective and efficient moving forward? So this is one thing we've learned. We can't function without automation. Operations and processes that require people and paper are vulnerable business to business breakdowns and changes. Think about COVID, think about your experience with it. Think about what happened when we moved to remote work models. From the perspective of where I sat, number one, we got inundated with calls from folks who had broken processes. We did some survey work around that and found 66% of organizations had broken processes as a result of moving to just the remote work model, not even all the other challenges around things that changed with dealing with the virus and dealing with people moving back to offices and tracking different types of information. And I'll tell you, those that were automated were in a much better position to move forward much more quickly and much more adaptably. So automation won. It was pretty unambiguous. We've kind of gone back and forth about, is automation always the answer? No, automation isn't always the answer. But the question I ask my clients is not should you automate, but when should you not automate? And the answer is you almost always are moving towards automation. And then the second one was these adaptable foundations, companies that had more adaptable foundations, that were more invested in tools that allowed them to very rapidly deal with issues, as opposed to, bringing in the systems integrator and coming through, months of requirements planning and then building software and hoping that it worked and then adjusting it. These rapid iterative development cycles that are enabled by things like low-code processes and RPA and a lot of powerful emerging technologies came to the forefront as really the winning strategies. If you think about how folks were responding to things like PPP loan applications, if you think about how folks were responding to things like COVID tracking applications, these were almost always built with these new rapid development approaches. So how important is this? Let's take a step back from kind of what's going on at this exact moment in time and COVID and digital transformation, and just say from a business perspective, we asked folks this is over the course of 5 years that we've been doing this survey. And I've been tracking these during the course of that 5 years very closely. And we asked this question at the top very specifically: what is the primary focus of your process optimization efforts for each of the time periods below? We asked them, what were you focusing on 2 years ago? What are you focusing on now? What will you focus on 2 years from now? And let's just look at this year's results and look at cost reduction, which 2 years ago was the top driver, 33%. Now it's down to 9%. But look at improved customer experience, goes from 14 to 25% now, up to 32% 2 years from now. And accelerate digital business transformation goes from 12 to 32 to 37. So add up digital transformation as a primary driver and improving customer experience, end up with 69% of folks who have goals that I would argue are incredibly strategic. And these are more often coming from the C-level and the board level than they are coming from within discrete parts of the organization. So it's become important. It's become something that folks need to do to survive. And this idea that software is an expression of my business is something that is becoming deeply internalized within these organizations. These goals are strategic, but if we look at the tactical pieces around this, what are you trying to achieve? And just focus on the dark green lines on the left and the light green kind of lines next to them. That's what's important now and what's important in the future. The light green line is the non-important. Efficiency and productivity, customer satisfaction, cost reduction, quality improvements, revenue contribution. All of these things mixing between incredibly tactical and incredibly strategic, but all with really, really high levels of value around them. And if we just look at customer satisfaction or improving customer experience, 70%, almost 71% say it's important now, with another 27% nearly saying it's important in the future. So these goals are big, they're audacious, they are, I would argue, survival type goals in terms of being able to respond to these types of challenges. I want to take just a quick step back and explain something in the data that might not be immediately apparent. And it's this piece around, this is out of the previous slide, highlighting cost reduction improvements. Okay, so a minute and 40 seconds ago, you heard me saying cost reduction is not as important as it used to be, and it's falling as going forward. And that is true in terms of the primary driver. The primary drivers now tend to be around driving a digital business or customer experience. Again, those are big strategic goals. Does that mean we're not focused on cost reduction any longer? Absolutely not. 63% say it's important now, and 31% say it's important in the future. What does that mean? What does that mean? Is that counterintuitive? And the answer is no, absolutely not. The answer is you're focused on the large goals and you have an expectation that it will cause cost reductions, that it will drive cost reductions, and it will. Driving more straight-through processing, driving more efficiency and hopefully more effectiveness will help your business. It will help the bottom line. Reduction of error, reduction of menial work that's being done so people can focus on important work, all of which will drive cost improvement. But it's an expectation. I would implore you to measure it. It's really important, but it's no longer your primary driver. Your primary drivers are broader and they come from higher within the organization. There's three things here in the box here. We asked folks, what are your plans to leverage digital technologies in the future? And the top three: reinvent and reimagine existing processes, automate large numbers of currently manual processes to drive end-to-end transformation, and the third one there, We plan to completely transform our end-to-end processes to better support our business strategies. These all have a commonality, and the commonality across them, and the 76% total here, is they're all trying to drive end-to-end straight-through processing. Not always, not all the time. There's still humans in the loop. It still makes sense. There's still human decision-making. There are still certain times where customer intimacy is the answer. But on the whole, they're trying to drive end-to-end processing. 76% of organizations. That is a lot of end-to-end processing. Drive. What's sitting behind what is the troll sitting under the bridge? What is sitting behind the scenes here that makes this so incredibly difficult if we do things the old-fashioned way? Well, it's paper and it's spreadsheets, right? So we have folks, how are you automating your processes today? We have this huge number that are still taking dependencies on Excel and email as a process automation technology. Look at the middle bar there, 46% have many of their processes running in Excel. These are things that are exception handling. These are things that IT couldn't get to. These are things that don't happen very often, so they're not seen as high value, but they're all over the place, and it makes sense. The only tool we've given our employees to actually drive innovation, to drive automation, it's Excel and email. I mean, for the most part, that's it, unless you're out there playing with something that you probably shouldn't be playing with from an IT perspective. On the left, let's look at paper. 50% of organizations still have a few processes running in paper, and 23% have many processes running in paper. We've been chipping away at this for years, but I'll tell you, when COVID hit and there was nobody in the mailroom, and that little inefficiency that was in the middle of a process that required taking a file folder and passing it over to your colleague in the next cubicle, that was gone. That was broken. That was the result of people calling up and saying, we're not recognizing revenue. We're not serving customers. We're not doing our core business operations, because what was inefficient in January of 2020 was broken in April of 2020 when we had to change our work patterns. So there's a lot of it, and we have to be able to react to it very, very quickly. There's another piece that I want to talk about here. So you have a huge job, and you have to think about it differently than we've thought about it in the past. But look at some of the things that are driving process optimization over the course of the next 24 months. We see a renewed interest in things like process documentation and process modeling. We see a huge focus on lean startup. I want to start small. I want to move quickly. We see a big focus on design thinking there in the third line. 46% say, I have to think about this in terms of people using this software and how it's going to affect that journey. Value stream mapping. What are the goals of my organization from a strategic perspective, and how do I align my process optimization goals to meet those? Customer journey mapping, and then on through BPMN as a notation language and Lean Six Sigma. All these things are increasing, and they're increasing because this stuff is becoming increasingly strategic. But look at the boundaries we're crossing. We're going across process optimization, automation, customer experience. This is touching a lot of different parts of my organization, but most importantly, it's a very, very different strategic and business-focused way of looking at how I'm achieving my automation goals. Process engineering, process intelligence, re-engineering back in a big way. So at the top, we've got BPMN, which is business process modeling, saying that we're thinking about re-engineering in very specific ways. But look at the bottom, process mining and process intelligence. Understanding what's going on in my business, 28% planning to use it. That's a big number. But look at 28% in use and another 13.7, almost 40% expanding usage. These are huge numbers that say, if I'm going to re-engineer my business, I need to understand my business. I need to know what's going on, and I need to make that part of my core DNA. What does this show up? How does this show up in terms of how our clients are working with this? Well, we're starting to see this very, very contiguous journey from I'm discovering my processes using things like process task mining, process analytics. I'm moving forward into analyzing it. Does it work? Is it causing my business issues? Is it causing me to not meet my strategic goals? Moving into document re-engineering. I'm modeling, I'm doing process documentation, I'm making sure the process is actually clean, is running the way it should be. And then I'm using new tools like DPA, low code, and RPA to say I can automate things, and I can automate things fundamentally more quickly, right? If there's a piece of paper in thing that's causing my process to break down, I can take that out very, very quickly. If there are manual processes that are happening today in Excel, I could potentially deploy an RPA bot and start to bring those online into a managed platform very, very quickly. Then what do? I repeat the process. I go back into discovery, I go back into analysis. Did it get better? Did it provide context to improve still further? And this is the pattern we see organizations working towards, moving from discovery, analysis, really taking this process opportunity very seriously from an optimization perspective, and then applying the automation and revisiting. There's process and there's task mining. There's a couple different flavors of this. Think about process mining as something that happens on your event logs. We kind of think about that as the highway. And then task mining being something that's more focused on what individuals are doing to drive the process forward on an individual and a desktop level. So task mining focuses on these desktop activities, these task analytics. The output tends to go to your bot developers, tends to often be focused on RPA because RPA is incredibly good at emulating and automating what humans are doing. And think about it from the perspective of task automation. These two kind of go together really, really well. We're going to focus a little bit more on this idea of task mining here for the next few minutes as we move forward. So, wow, that was a lot. It went through it very, very quickly. But I kind of want to leave with this message before we pass back to Shob. Keep calm and standardize, right? So the way there is a daunting level of automation that we're going to be required to address. I think it's quite critical in terms of organizations surviving, whether it's the adaptability that we need, that we saw with things like COVID or the failed digital transformation, or simply the speed of business. I don't know what's going to be the next forcing function. I just know there's going to be a forcing function that is going to say you are not keeping up, you are not automating at the level that you need to, and understanding and optimizing your business processes at the level that you need to. And that drives us towards standardization. One thing I can say is that during the course of COVID, solutions like Worksoft went from, this is something we're piloting, this is something that's really intriguing to us, this is something where maybe we've had really, really good traction within parts of our organization, to this has to be a standard way of developing and automating software. This has to be a way that we actually drive this forward in a standardized way across the organization. Why? Why am I saying standardized? Because of scalability, because of data access, because of governance, because of training, because of change management, getting all those people in your organization on board with what you're doing. All of these things say, take this very, very seriously, make this a first-class component of your software development portfolio, and then drive it forward across your organization as needed. So with that, what I want to do is I want to pass back to Shob and get kind of the Worksoft perspective on it.
Thanks, Alicia and Rob. There were some really, really interesting insights into what you talked about. So what I'll do is I'll pick up sort of where Rob left off, and we'll go deeper into intelligent automation and how you can apply it to optimize your digital processes and our viewpoint on this. So once again, right, if I summarize some of the statistics that Rob presented, we have 76% of organizations plan to leverage some sort of digital process optimization. So what we are saying here, right, is why are these organizations and why so many of them are planning to optimize their digital processes and adopt automation in some form or another for end-to-end automation? It's not just for cost savings, right? This was an important aspect that both Rob's research and then our experience with our customers is telling us, right? So the first part of this is to provide a stellar end user experience. And the reason for this is, most interactions today with your customers, with your employees, with your partners, your suppliers are digital. So that digital interaction that your key constituents have with you has to be great because that's directly tied into revenue, right? The top line. So if your end user experience, your end user digital experience is not right, you are not going to gain market share. You're not going to grow revenue. So this is directly tied to the health of your business to optimize those end user experiences. The second one is to innovate faster, right? Because things are changing so rapidly, business models are changing, the environment is very competitive. So to stay competitive, companies need to innovate faster. And those are the two top reasons to have digital processes, to optimize them, to use automation. And then of course, cost efficiencies and time efficiencies are really important, right? So cost efficiencies to minimize costs in all areas, and time efficiencies to do things faster, right? To deliver the results faster to your end customers. So that's why people are so interested in optimizing their end-to-end processes. So what we have noticed occurred in the last, I would say, 5 years is that there is now this convergence of enterprise applications, intelligent automation, and digital processes, right? By convergence, what I mean is the boundaries between those things are blurring, right? So you use some combination of your enterprise applications combined with intelligent automation to deliver the right digital process. So the focus shifts on the process, right? Not on any individual enterprise application or any individual piece of automation, but the process is key, and the combination of enterprise applications and intelligent automations to deliver the right process outcomes are then key. So if that's the case, then how should intelligent automation be applied, and how has intelligent automation evolved to address that, to address this convergence, right? So from our perspective, right, we think the automation should address the full life cycle of your digital process. From the time you're trying to understand what you do, and then using that understanding to drive de-risking your processes, right? Making sure that the processes are working all the time, because underlying applications change, business rules change. There's change that's occurring every other minute, if you will. And how do you make sure that you have de-risked your processes so that they're working all the time? And then also optimizing those processes in production, right? And that optimization can come from either improving or reimagining the process, or through automation, right? And that automation could be RPA or low code, right? The de-risk comes from automated testing, and then the understanding comes from process intelligence. And this is not a linear thing, it's a closed loop concept, right? Because better understanding leads to better de-risking, leads to better optimization, and then the automation that you build for de-risking and optimizing leads to better understanding, right? So it all feeds upon itself throughout that process lifecycle. So our platform then has evolved to take this into account, this connectedness between understanding and automation, and therefore we call it the Worksoft Connective Automation Platform. And the way things work is, on the left-hand side, you have two primary sources of process information. And again, Rob went through these also. There's process mining, which gets process information and process flows from back-end system activity, right? System logs, documents that are created, database tables on your back-end. All that information can be mined to give you process flows, process variations, long-running process information. And then process capture or task mining allows you to fill in the details for each business activity, right? So that's based on what your end users do on a day-to-day basis, the so-called journey mapping, right? And this journey mapping can be from a customer's perspective, it could be from an employee's perspective, it could be from a supplier's perspective. So the journey mapping information combines with the process mining information to give you this 360-degree view of your process. And then you can create analytics on top, right? You can say, okay, where are the areas I should optimize? What's the potential savings from that optimization? How do I track it, and so on, right? You also get process documentation that's just generated automatically for you. And then you also get automation that gets generated from process intelligence. So that's the left-hand side, the front end part of it. And then once you generate the automation, you can now create reusable components, right? So the idea here is that you take the information that you've gathered on your business processes, you now create reusable pieces of automation, and then this automation can be used for different purposes, right? The library of reusable components, and the library can then be targeted for either end-to-end business process testing, right? Same components, or for RPA, right? So this is production automation where you are using those components to eliminate manual tasks or bottlenecks or inefficiencies in your processes. So same set of components used for two different purposes, and therefore you get value from your investment in automation, from your investment in process intelligence across the entire spectrum of your business process, right? From customizing it, optimizing it, deploying it into production, and then post-production optimizations. So we think that one platform, if it connects all of these pieces together, provides the best ROI. And that's how we think state-of-the-art automation needs to evolve, and that's what we have done to push those things forward. All right, so let's take a quick look at what it looks like. I'll walk through a few screens just to give you a flavor and visuals of this. So here we have a dashboard, right? And in this dashboard, we have actually taken process information, both from process mining and task mining, combined it together, and we can project what kind of savings you will get if you implement optimization and automation, right? And there are three buckets of those savings, right? There is savings from process optimization, there is savings from business process testing, and then there is savings from RPA, right? So those are potential savings, and then we also tell you how much of it you have realized. So when you do implement automation or you do implement those optimizations, we can calculate your savings and show you what kind of return on investment you're getting from the digital, digital transformation projects or process optimization projects. So we can quantify the value of what you have done. And then we can also break it down by departments, right? So we can break it down here, sales and distribution, logistics, material management, HR, and so forth. And what we can also do then is, from that analysis, right, we can tell you where to start, right? So we can look at your processes and say, okay, where is the most potential for optimization? Where do you have the top scattered variance, right? Where do you have more variance? Where do you take the most amount of time? Where do you have lost productivity? So we can look at information that we collect and then recommend to you what should you automate, and where you should start, and what will give you the best return on investment when you apply your investments in automation. So once we give you that roadmap, you can then proceed further, right? So here what I'm going to do is dive down into an actual process at a great level of detail. Remember, we started at the top, at the whole business department level. We then showed recommendations, of where you should target automation, and now we're down into the process, right? So in the process, we get different business activities, right? Here we have create sales order, change material, delivery documents, all the things that you typically do in an order to cash process. And what we're able to show you is parts of the process that are automated, that are in blue. We can also show you the source of the information, right? Where did we get this business activity from? It could come from, a process capture. It could come from process mining. It could come from reading out your pre-existing automation. So we combine those sources and tell you the business activities and where they came from. We also show you bottlenecks between activities, right? So if you see green arrows, it means that those are fairly streamlined flows. It's not taking a long time to go from one activity to another. But where you see yellow and red, it means that there are bottlenecks, right? It means that something is wrong, and you can click on those arrows to figure out where you should optimize and how you should reduce the amount of time and bottlenecks between those processes. And then the thicker the line, it means that's the most frequent flow. The thinner the line, it means those are outlier workflows. And maybe you should think about eliminating those outlier workflows, right? To simplify and reduce the number of variants you have of your processes. And all of this is targeted to get the best possible process you can. And with complete transparency like this, with all the durations, costs, how activities are connected, where there are bottlenecks, what is automated, what is not. It gives you a really good idea on what to do and how to move forward here, right? Then of course we can further break this down, right? Where we have department labels on top of each of the business activities on what particular department it falls under. We can deconstruct the work the variations to give you each individual variation. And then from here, you can select a variation of a process and say, go generate a document for me for this particular process, and then go generate the automation for me, right? So that automation that's generated from this activity is already 60 to 70% complete. And then your automation experts can then take it and create reusable components from it, okay? So that's how the front end works to get you better automation, better components, and better business value on the back end. Right. So a couple of things to emphasize here, right? People try to make things very complicated, and again, Rob ended up with, keep calm and standardize. So what I'm going to tell you is there are two key aspects to intelligent automation that you should look at, right? The first one is how quickly can you get value, right? You don't want to spend weeks or months or years trying to get value. You want to be able to get value in days, right? So just like Rob, I'm a big fan of incremental agile projects where you implement something and get value in a matter of days, and then you feed upon it, right? So once people see the value you're getting, they're excited, you'll build more automation and so on. So you want a solution that gets you to critical mass fast, right? And allows you to show value transparently fast, right? So that's one key aspect that we focus on, right? How do you get value in a matter of days so that automation doesn't become a chore, doesn't become something that you have to wait 6 to 9 months to get? It's something you get immediately, right? So that's one aspect. And for this to occur, it is critical to have business and IT collaborate, right? Because business is key in driving what to automate and the value from it. So business IT collaboration is key. And getting a broader audience to contribute to the automation is key. It can't just be your automation expert, right? It has to be a whole company that's actually contributing to the automation, right? So that's what gets you results faster. That's what gets you what we call day zero value. And therefore, that's what keeps the momentum going to get you to critical mass faster, okay? The next part, which is also key, is resiliency, right? So it's no use if you build automation today and then 3 days later it breaks because your applications have changed or your processes have changed, right? That's useless because now you're going to spend all of your time and all of your energy trying to fix what you have built rather than actually use what you have built to get value, right? So the automation, the core automation has to be resilient to application changes. It has to heal itself, right? So this concept of self-healing automation is very significant, right? Because if you don't perfect this, a lot of companies don't pay attention to the core automation. They might pay attention to the bells and whistles on top, but automation not breaking is a very, very important feature. And so the maintenance part of automation has to be almost seamless, right? So this is something that we have focused quite a bit on over the last 15 years to make sure that if you do build automation, you get value from that automation for a long period of time, right? Enterprise value across several years of running it, okay? So two things, build automation fast, make sure that it's resilient to changes, right? Those two things is something that you should evaluate, during your POCs or whatever other evaluation criteria you have to pick an automation solution for you. Okay, so quickly a couple of customer use cases. Just wanted to put in a flavor of the real world and what people are doing, right? So Applied Material has been a Worksoft customer for a long time, and it's a very forward-looking company, right? So what they have done is they have combined test automation and RPA into one organization, and they've achieved significant value from doing that because they can reuse automation across the board for the whole process lifecycle. And also, when they do deploy automation in production, they are assured that it's well tested. And then whatever automation components they build can be used for automated testing, can also be used for RPA, right? So this was key, right? And they have a pretty complex enterprise application landscape. They have SAP, Workday, they have parts of Oracle, custom-built applications, web applications, and so on. But the value here is to get this ROI over a period of years across multiple transformation projects, across multiple complex upgrades, and so on, right? And then that adds up quite significantly over a period of time, right? With Accenture, the interesting part of this was also the same, right? So they were looking to automate month-end close business activities. And those can get fairly complex, right? Because the data is coming from, dozens of systems to close out your books every month. So what they did was they first built testing for this month-end close set of activities. They automated the testing. And then they soon realized, hey, wait a minute, right? The things I do to test this stuff, I can also do in production so that I don't have to do this stuff manually, right? So I can automatically pull data from the multiple systems. I can then combine and consolidate them together and then enter it back into my reporting systems and then automatically generate the month-end closing data that I need for reporting purposes, right? So that was the use case there. And then finally at Cardinal Health, the automation was deployed for a large S4 HANA transformation project. And then they had a pretty interesting landscape, right? So they had front-end web applications for their distribution. They had, SAP. They had Manhattan Associates application for warehouse management and so on. But what they realized quickly was, they wanted to involve the business in this, right? Because they were doing this transformation and doing this implementation. They had business functional user do journey maps with process capture so that they understood what the processes looked like. And from that, they generated automation that was useful, right? So instead of just trying to figure out what to automate without any business input, they had the business do journey mapping and capturing their processes, use that information to build automation, and then deploy that automation to speed up their implementation, right? And the automation can be used not just for testing, right, but also for config ops, right? So they can use that for configuring systems, for loading data, for doing all kinds of day-to-day activity that's a hassle and that takes a lot of time and foreground bandwidth from their people, and they free them up now to do more strategic things, right? So this happened throughout the life cycle from the start, which is capturing the requirements, to then using it during the development phase and testing phase, and then deploying it post-production for RPA, right? So again, the whole life cycle automation applied consistently for large transformation projects. Okay. And my last slide, what I wanted to end up with quickly was, again, we said, why are you doing this, right? You're doing this because you want to deliver that end user experience that drives digital revenue, right? So digital experiences drive revenue. And therefore, you want to be able to build this automation quickly, and you want to do it with business and IT involved together, right? So I agree with Rob again that business involvement is key to any kind of success. You want to accelerate delivery of everything that you do, yet at the same time, you don't want to sacrifice quality, right? You want to make sure that you deliver high quality solutions quick, right? You want to make automation that's reusable and maintainable, right? So you want automation that's resilient to changes, that can be used for multiple things, and that seamlessly flows in your organization, right? So it will flow from the business to IT to operations to compliance, right? So you want automation that's fluid, right? That a business contributes their part, compliance contributes their part, IT and ops contribute their part, right? So you want to make sure that a collaboration exists, and you want to consistently deliver value on an ongoing basis, right? It's not a one-time thing. It's not that you build it and you forget about it. You're constantly improving. You're constantly getting more value. You're constantly adding more, and then that's what helps you really succeed with your digital transformation projects and actually continue to succeed post completion of those projects as you go along on day-to-day activities after that. And I'll end here, and then we can go to the Q&A part of the presentation. So if you have any questions, please do send them over the questions tab, and then Rob and I will answer those questions as they come in.
Thank you, Shod. Yes, we do have some questions to keep the conversation going. One, how does this type of approach relate to agility?
Shob, you want me to take that first?
Yes, Alicia, could you repeat the question one more time? I
Yes.
broke
How
up a
does
bit.
how does this type of approach relate to agility?
Yeah, so I think, right, that this approach is key to agility because you're able to deploy faster and smaller chunks as you do this, right? So if you have sprints, we recommend building automation during the sprint and then deploying it every sprint that you deploy the product, right? So the same automation that you use for testing within that sprint can be used for deployment purposes. And then that adds to the library of automation that runs as you deliver functionality incrementally, right? So I think automation is a key part of agile processes and actually delivering in an agile manner.
Yep. So Shob, I agree 100%. To me, this feels like a reaction to the agility mandate, the agility imperative that I talked about a couple of times. What were these forcing functions? Whether it was, COVID was clearly a forcing function, but I don't know what the next one is. Right? Is it another one that's health related? Is it environmental? Right? We saw issues with with fires in California and freezing in Texas, and who knows what's going to come next. Or is it just business? Is it geopolitical, right? Or is it just the pace of business, right? Is it just that your competitor is going to put you out of business because they're better, faster, more effective? I don't know the forcing function, but I do know that we're really acutely aware now that agility is critical, and thinking about things differently is critical. And I think this manner of thinking, these types of tools, these types of methodologies and approaches have really come to the forefront as a result of that, have really sort of proven themselves as agile and adaptable solutions.
Right. How should we think about this in terms of IT involvement, and why has this changed so much in the past few years?
Want me to jump on that?
I can jump on that first. And then,
Go ahead, Shob.
I mean, of course, IT is always involved in everything, right? What has, I think, changed is the other end, right? The collaboration between business and IT. And I think IT plays a more strategic role in that collaboration as does the business. So, I don't want to minimize the role of IT or say IT is less important. What I want to say is, if you involve the business in these projects, the outcomes are better and IT gets to show more strategic value when that happens, right? So I think that collaboration is significant, right? It's not just business, it's IT, it's operations, and it's compliance, right? I think there are 4 constituents that need to collaborate to actually produce the right outcomes. IT does, of course, a lot of the work to do the implementation. Business does a lot of the work to make sure that the value that you're making those investments for are realized. And then operations and compliance make sure that you don't have a catastrophic failure, right, when you do all this stuff.
So let me pile on here and just say, IT is hard, right? It's like, oh, let's just let us do whatever we want and build whatever we want, and then but they're the ones that end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. If there's a security breach, if there's a compliance issue, if there's a privacy breach, so they have a hard job. So. And by the way, they are acutely aware of their inability to scale using the way we've done things before, the way we've worked before. So let's think of them as necessary gatekeepers at the beginning. It has to be secure. It has to generate privacy. It has to make sure that data integrity is maintained. It has to make sure that compliance is understood. And then move from that to partner, right? They understand the challenges as well as the business does, that this idea, this need for doing things differently, for wide scale automation is absolutely required. And so as you move in, that's the keep calm and standardize, right? It's move forward with them as partners, move from gatekeeper. They understand it. They understand all the implications. They have a very hard job. They will sign off on it, right? They will do their due diligence and they will sign off on it. But then the idea is that they're partners in moving this automation mindset forward with the organization. And I talk to IT all the time, and I don't think IT. I don't think they're the bad guys. I think they are the guys who have a very hard job. They have to maintain diligence around that job, but ultimately they are a great partner for you in this.
Thanks, guys. So another question, and I think Rob kind of touched on this, and you may even have a statistic off the top of your head, but how common is process mining now? What percentage of companies are actually adopting process mining? What trends are you seeing there? And again, I think you talked to this to the beginning, but we do have a question.
I do have that number, Alicia, but I'm old, so I'm pull it back up. Process mining is, and we call it process mining and process intelligence. So that would include task mining and deep process intelligence. It is 28% people are using it today. There is an additional 28% that are planning to use it in the next 24 months. And then of the 28% that are using it today, about 14% are expanding usage. So, it's I would say 28% is really strong for an emerging technology in terms of penetration. But what's more interesting, I think, is the planning to use numbers are huge, right? They're huge.
Great. It sounds like it's definitely growing.
We see the same, amongst our customer base, right? The numbers that Rob mentioned. It is still emerging technology, but there's a huge amount of interest in it.
It's also, Ashok, I think we're mentioning that it's old.
Right? Yeah, but it's kind of really doing well now because it works really well, right? It took a while to get right, but now I think it really.
Yeah, but I think the thing that I'll often talk about, since this is happening less than it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was getting calls from North America and the UK, and they're like, "What is it? I've never heard of it." It's like, well, ask your friends in Germany. They've been all over it for a long time. But it's these technologies have been around for decades, and they work really well, and they work as advertised. So it's one of those things where it's like, well, it's new. Do I want to kind of be the first ones who are using it? It's like, no, you're not going to be the first ones using it. If this stuff has been well proven, it works as advertised. It's been out there for a very, very long time. It's kind of like the band that struggles for 20 years and then suddenly becomes an overnight sensation, right? It's like this whole process intelligence space has become an overnight sensation, but it's been around for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you very much. We are pretty much at time here, and appreciate the insights. Lots of good perspectives on things that are changing and opportunities to adapt and really optimize and improve processes using these technologies. So thank you both for your time, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you, Alicia.